Okay, so we've got our sign up handler implemented. Let's go ahead and look at the sign in handler so that we can go ahead and issue a JWT token pair whenever the user authenticates. API server sign in handler. This looks good. I'm going to return handler that wraps the HTTP handler func that returns an error. And what we're going to do is expect a payload that contains the user's email and password. So let's go ahead and create a type for that. Sign in request. We're going to have email, password. The AI or whatever this is in this IDE is so awesome because if I've written similar code in the past, I basically just have to tab it and it auto completes it for me. So this is actually super nice for just moving quickly. So if you'll remember, we want to provide a validate method so that we can provide it to our decode helper. So sign-in request.validate. Let's check if the email's empty. We'll return it, an error that specifies that. Same thing for password, and we'll just return nil otherwise. Decode takes in a sign-in request and the request object, and we'll return the unmarshaled object here. And we can go ahead and check this. New error with status, bad request. That looks good. Now we can go ahead and check if the user exists. So let's just request, let's go ahead and retrieve the user by that email. So let's say user error is equal to s.store.users by email. All of this looks great. And okay, so we've retrieved the email, or sorry, we've retrieved the user by email. Now we need to verify that the password matches. So we can make use of that compare password method that we added to the user some time ago. User compare password, and we'll pass in the password that was provided in the request. Okay. And now what we can do is, since we've verified that this is correct, or that this is a valid, now we've verified that the user has valid credentials, we can issue a token for that user. So our API server is going to need access to the JWT manager. Let's make sure that we go ahead and add that. Okay, so now we can do s.jwtmanager.generate token pair, and we have the user ID accessible, so we can go ahead and provide that. Token pair, let's return an error, internal server error. And I want to make sure that we also have a response for the specific endpoint. So let's go ahead and do a sign-in response. This is just going to be the access token and refresh token, raw string values, not the whole objects themselves. So we'll do access token string, refresh token string. Okay, this looks perfect. Now let's go ahead and encode our response here. So we can do encode API response of sign in response, and we can do data is going to be equal to sign in response access token will be token pair dot access token dot raw. And then we can do refresh token is okay. And we need to provide a status okay, and then provide the writer, response writer object. All right. I think we can return nil here. And we're in good shape. What do we got here? Oh, this returns an error. Let's go ahead and check that as well, just in case. If error is not equal to nil, return internal server error. Okay, that looks great. And there's actually one thing that's missing here is when we generate the token pair, I want to persist the refresh token in the database because we have this refresh tokens table that tells us that a refresh token is still valid. We want to make sure that we could revoke access for a user by removing it from this table if needed. So what we need to do is actually create our data store, or what we actually need to do is create our data access layer for this refresh tokens table. So let's go ahead and do that so that we can have a complete handler implemented here. So let's go into our store, create a refresh tokens file. We're going to have refresh tokens store. We're going to pass a SQLX DB. And just like last time, we're actually going to provide a standard library DB that will actually be converted to a SQLX DB. Okay, and once again, we're using the Postgres driver. Let's go ahead and do libpq import with the side effect thing. And what we want to do here is create a refresh token record. So let's go ahead and add a method for that. Always provide the context. And we're going to provide the actual JWT token object here. And the reason I'm providing this entire token object here is so that I can have access to the expiration, because I think it's good to also persist that in the database. So one thing I actually want to do is create a type that maps to this table here. So we need a user ID, hash token, created at, and expires at. Okay, and you'll notice that I have default values, of course, for the created at timestamp that gets created automatically when we create a record. But just in case that an expiration is not provided, I want it to default to 1 day from now, since we wouldn't want this to accidentally be omitted. So just in case, it's a good practice probably to provide a default value if this wasn't provided. So I'm just going to make it 1 day. That seems pretty reasonable. So we'll return our refresh token object error. This is going to look a lot like the other code that we've written previously. We're going to have to hash the token, the raw token value, and persist that into the database. So const insert is going to equal insert into refresh tokens, user ID, hashed token, and expires at. Okay, now using the bcrypt library, we're going to go ahead and hash this token. And once again, we'll use the default cost here. There may be an error. The error is not equal to nil. Let's just return. That's fine. And once again, I want to actually, since this was returning bytes, I want to base 64 encode this, then store it in the database. So let's do base 64 standard encoding dot encode to string. Let's say base 64. Okay, and let's do s.db.getContext. I'll provide the destination. And now we can provide the user ID, which is technically on the token itself. Let's go ahead and grab that. Actually, we can just directly provide it. We don't have to go through the hassle of extracting it from the subject. Okay. User ID and then base 64 token hash. Say if error. Okay, let's just say cool, and we'll return the refresh token and nil. Okay, so that looks pretty good to me. The next thing I'd like to do is also add one additional method that allows us to look up a token using the user ID and hashed raw token string. So let's just do refresh token store. Let's just say by primary key. Because I have created this so that the user ID and the hash token are part of the primary key. They're making up a composite key there. Okay. Okay, and yeah, we can just pass in the token directly. So we're going to do very similar stuff here. I'm actually going to extract this potentially into a helper that I can use here as well. So let's just go ahead and get the select, const queries equal to select star from refresh tokens where ID equals this and hash token is equal to 2. That's good. And we're not going to provide, all this looks good except for this part. We need to convert this into the base 64 hash that we have up here. So I'm going to go ahead and create this, move this into a helper method. So let's just do s refresh token store get base 64 hash from token. This will be the jwt.token. I don't think we need that. And we're just going to return a string or an error here. And I'm going to grab all of this. Okay, let me just make sure this looks good. Let's say base 64 token hash. Okay, let's do the same thing here. One thing I just remembered is that we are not providing the expires at here, so let's go ahead and grab that. And we can just say expires at. Okay, so we're just using the existing claim expiration and using that as the expires at time. Okay. Okay, so this looks like a good place for us to go ahead and write some unit tests. This should be pretty quick since we already got this, since we already got the test infrastructure set up. So let's do refresh token test.go. Once again, we're gonna make sure that this is an underscore test package. We're gonna test refresh tokens store. We'll create our test environment. If you missed the last video or the video before that, go check that out because we set this up to make our tests quite clean. env.cleanup setup. We got a cleanup helper here. If let's do t.cleanup func, and we can do cleanup. So we're just setting up our database, making sure it's migrated, and then after the test is over, we can clean it up to make sure it's empty. Now we need to create an instance of our refresh token store. Okay, so now we've got our refresh token store. We want to create a JSON web token, so it'll be easiest if we just use our JWT manager to generate that for us. So let's do JWT manager dot new JWT manager. We've got our config here, and let's have a user ID to create our tokens. And let's do JWT manager dot generate token pair from the user ID. Verify there's no error. We don't want to do this. We want to do require.no error. Okay. And now we can go ahead and create a record. Make sure we provide our context. We're providing our user ID, and we're going to provide our token. So let's go ahead and do token pair refresh token. Okay. And let's go ahead and just verify that the user ID matches, and that should be good for now. And then we can go ahead and query the same record using the hashed token. So we can go ahead and assert that our user ID matches. Okay, let's go ahead and run this. Okay, I can see that I'm getting a error in my unit test related to the bcrypt password length exceeding 72 bytes. So it looks like there's actually a limit on the length of the password that you can provide to generate from password. So I forgot about this, and this is actually a very quick fix. I can actually just do this and hash this using another method. So we can do h SHA-256 new, then do h.write. That is not what I wanted. h.write. Let's do token.raw. We can actually do h.write, pass in the bytes here, and then we can actually get the hashed bytes by doing this. And provide that here to the base 64 encoding. So that's a simple fix. Let me rerun the test and make sure that this works correctly. Okay, I'm actually getting an error. I'm getting the following error. Failed to create refresh token record, PQ, insert or update on table. Refresh tokens violates foreign key constraint. Refresh tokens, user ID. The issue here is that I've got a primary key of user ID hash token, and the user ID references the users table. I do not have a user created yet, so it's violating this constraint. So actually what I need to do in order to insert this, to create this record, is create a fake user. So I can easily do that. Let's just do user store. Okay, and then let's do, move the context up, and let's just create user store. Create user, pass in test at email.com, and then do test. Require no error. Okay, now that I've got the user created, I can just make sure that I'm not using this fake user ID. We've got an actual created user, so I can do user.id, user.id, user.id. And I'm getting a separate error now. Failed to create refresh token record SQL, no rows in result set. So when I create, I need to actually do returning star. And so the reason why we do this, I don't know if I explained this earlier, but we want to do returning star because when we execute this, the SQL, this insert statement, it's reselecting all the rows and we're populating it back into this refresh token record here. So that's kind of how SQLX works, if you didn't look into it already. So I'm going to go back to the test, see if this works. All right, I've got a passing test now. So even when you've got a direction that you're going in and you sort of know what you're coding, testing is actually helpful because you never know what you're missing. So I've written some code very similar to this before, and I'm still having errors. So writing unit tests is very helpful. Okay, so we've created the refresh token record. Now we're getting a passing test here. I want to be able to query the same refresh token record by primary key just to make sure that I'm testing this method here works correctly. So let's do refresh token record 2 error refresh token store dot by primary key. We'll get the context user ID, and then we want to pass in the token pair refresh token. Okay. And what we should do is assert that, we can assert that each field member is equal. So let's do hash token. This should all be equal. So you may think this is overkill. Maybe it is, but I like to do it anyway. Equal T refresh record, refresh token store, refresh token record dot created at record 2 dot Okay, and I do want to do one assertion before, right after this is created. I do want to make sure that the expiration matches the claim that we expect. So let's do expires at let's do token pair dot refresh token dot claims dot get expiration time, require no error, and let's require that these are equal t expected expiration dot time, and I'll just do Unix milli for now just to make this, just to avoid any time zone objects that may be loaded on here. It can sometimes cause issues in tests. So I like to use Unix milli or some sort of integer representation of the current time. Let's do expected expiration and refresh token record expires at .unix milli. Okay. This looks pretty good. Fingers crossed. Let's run the tests. And it's all passing. So this is good. I can verify that my new data access layer logic is working correctly. Actually, and while we're here at this test, I want to do one more thing. I want to go ahead and add a delete method so that we can revoke the token if needed. So this should be not too much code. It should be refresh token store delete. We pass in the user ID, the token. Let's say const delete statement is equal to delete from refresh tokens where user ID and hash token is equal to that. Actually, it might be better to just delete all user tokens. Let's do it this way. And we can do if error is equal to s.db.get exec context. The reason why we're using exec is because we're not populating any data from a returned query. So we're just going to provide the delete statement and the user ID directly. Error is not equal to nil. We can return. Actually, I am going to return the result. There is a result returned here. I'm going to return the result because it should show how many rows were modified. Okay. So let's do result, SQL results. Okay, so I'm returning this so that I can have access to the number of rows deleted. Let's say result error is equal to refresh token store dot delete user tokens, user dot ID, require no error, and let's say result dot rows affected. Error. We should have no error getting this. And the rows affected should be the number of tokens that we have in the database. So there should only be one in the database. So we should say require equal. It should be one row. So let's go ahead and test this. We are now in good shape to, now that we've had some tests added for this data access layer, we can now go back to our handler and persist this in the database. So let's go ahead and do s.store. Okay, it looks like we've only got users in our store, our generic store that contains all of the tables. So let me go ahead and update that. We're going to add one more, refresh token store. Refresh token store, new refresh token store. Now we're in good shape. I automatically have access to this. So s.store.refresh token store, create r.context. What do I got to add here? The user ID, which is user.id, and then the token pair dot refresh token. Okay. I actually don't need to access the returned record in this scenario because we're just returning the raw token string. So this looks good. I should be able to sign into this handler, query the user, compare the password, generate a token pair, persist the refresh token in here, and return the token pair as a response. And before I go ahead and create this refresh token record, I want to clear out any existing user tokens so that they don't have multiple at a time. Let's do s.store.refresh token store.delete user tokens, r.context, user.id. Okay. So I think we're in a spot where we can manually test this. First thing I'm going to do is create a user from the sign up endpoint, and then I will use that user's credentials to sign in and get our token pair. I don't remember what the previous user I created was, so I'm going to go ahead and just do it all again. So go run cmd API server main.go. Given an error, we need to create our JWT manager. So API server.new JWT manager config. And we can provide the JWT manager there. Okay, API server is running now. Curl HTTP localhost 5000 auth sign up. Let's do curl-x post data. We'll do email test@test.com. Password test. Pipe this into JQ. And we've successfully signed up this user. So now I'm going to do something very similar. Do sign in. I'm passing in the same credentials. Okay, I'm getting a 404. Let's see. Did I do something silly like not even register it on my server? Let's see. Yes, did not do it. Okay. Mux, handle func, post, auth, sign in handler. Okay. Bounce the server, running again, issue the same request, pipe it into JQ. Okay, cool. Now I've got a response with an access token and a refresh token. So this is great. This is all working. What we need to do is make sure that we have a middleware that basically verifies our access token so that our routes can be protected. So let's go ahead and create our auth middleware.